I would like to welcome the lead strategist for Infunnel, Martin Stenke. Welcome, Martin.
Thank you, Mats.
And
It's
very
nice to be here.
nice to have you here in this studio.
It is very nice to be here.
So, what is your comments on the polls? Is that your same view that many people have installed MA system?
Increasingly, yes. There's still a lot of companies that does not have it, but I say increasingly, yeah, definitely.
And the value out of MA, what do you see there?
Well, my answer is, I didn't answer because I didn't have the time, but if I would have answered, my immediate response would have been data.
Data, yeah. You need to collect a lot of data.
Yeah, and you gain a lot of data as well. I mean, that's one of the benefits. And then you have to be good in structure, which I partly cover in my talk today on how to deal with that data. But data is crucial.
Good, welcome. Stage is yours.
Thank you. And like Mats said, these roughly 20 minutes will be around the customer journey and how to avoid it becoming a desktop product. And I will touch upon or zoom in on 5 different topics where you could actually get the customer journey going, and maybe a slightly different view on what the customer journey is. Before I start, just a quick word. So my name is Martin Stenke, working as a lead strategist for the company Infunnel. You have my contact details there if you would like to get in touch afterwards. So a short summary to start with. This is what I will end up with at the end, what it's all about, because marketing automation can be complicated, just as some of you stated in the first question. But keep it simple. Keep it simple. Stupid is an old saying or a simple thing to remember. And that's really what it's all about. To start small, invest and work with pilots and proof of concepts and keep it small, and then grow gradually. Don't do the big thing to start with. We'll get back to that. Infunnel is a small company, but the customer journey is one of the vital pillars of what we do. If we talk about data, if we talk about content, if we talk about creating nurturing programs, it's all based on the fact that there is some kind of customer journey in behind. So we do strategy, we do implementation, we do trainings, and we also run campaigns, actual campaigns for our clients, and evaluate them to be able to optimize and analyze. We're present in Stockholm and in Malmö, but most of our clients are either on Nordic level or global ones, and you see some of them are in the client example box. We're also part of a larger group called the Nova Consulting Group, which is in a way constructed based on the fact that there is a customer journey. So the different companies within the group fulfill different parts of the customer journey. And currently in Sweden, there's 3 companies. There's Epinova, that does web. There's Pineberry, does search engine optimization and advertising, search engine marketing, and Infunnel, and we're focusing on marketing automation and CRM. Then there's also, I know there's attendees from other Nordic countries, so we have companies also in Norway that does not exactly the same things, but similar things, digital things along the customer journey. So that's a few words from the sponsors, if you'd like. And then an introduction to my 5 points. This is, we're about 1 month from Christmas. So I thought I'd bring along the classical julbord to talk about. Might seem a bit strange and crazy, but I hope I'll guide you into why. Because my first question around the customer journey is that, is there a perfect journey? Is it even possible to create the perfect journey with marketing automation or CRM technology? And I see quite a lot of trials or people thinking that there is a perfect way of creating a customer journey, where you want to take the customer from the first touch point to being a loyal customer that buys a lot. So you want them to start with a herring. You're really eager to take them from the herring to the ham, the cold meats, from the cold meats onwards towards the warm dishes, maybe down to the Jansson and over to the dessert. That's the perfect journey, right? So the big question is this the way people behave? Do they start with herring? Do they then go secondly to the cold meats? My very scientific study from last Christmas is they don't. Some do. Well, maybe 1%, maybe 2%, does it this way. So what we could call the perfect journey. But the truth is, when you stand there next to the julbord, what you see is this. People start with some bread and then pick some ham and they go off. Some start from the dessert and go back. Some start with the ris alla malta and then go to the eggs. And some of them just focus on the herring and they go back and select between the different types of herring. And I would say this is exactly the way customers behave in all types of companies, all types of market, all types of products. You cannot decide how the perfect customer journey looks like. So talking about the julbord is also talking about your offerings, your content. This is the way people move around in your digital channels. So how could we support this when it's so different? Of course, there is a customer journey. There's an individual customer journey for everyone. But could we look on the customer journey from a different perspective that always works? One way of doing that is to strictly define different steps, the so-called lead stages, and make them 100% data-driven. So when a user enters your websites, there's actually an algorithm from Google, for example, that says that we have an individual unique user. If this user fills in a form, signs up for the newsletter, signs up for Wednesday Relations newsletter, we've got a way of contacting them. Then we could define them as a lead. We have an email address or we have a telephone number. That's data-driven, and it's very easy to measure. And that makes it also possible to measure the conversion rate from user to lead. So it's very important to define these stages on the marketing side, which might be the user lead MQL, marketing qualified lead, but also connect them to the sales side, where sales accepted lead or sales qualified lead or won or lost deal are common attributes. So that's one way of actually looking at the customer journey. Another way is to structure your content so that the content becomes data-driven. That could potentially be very tricky. So my recommendation is to stick to a 3x3 model, which means that divide your julbord into 3 parts or 3 steps, or divide your content production into 3 steps. That could be called top funnel, middle of the funnel, and bottom funnel, for example. Stick with maximum 3 themes. That could be energy savings or cost efficiency or whatever. And don't start with more than 3 target groups or personas, because what happens if you do this, if you have 3 steps in a customer journey perspective for content, you have 3 themes, you have 3 personas. What happens when you start producing content for those journeys? Every time you interact with a client or potential lead, you have to create 27 different versions, right? 3 times 3 times 3. So that's the maximum. Probably more or too much to handle for most first journeys. And like I said, looking at those stages for content, you could compare this as well with the Yule board. So the starters, top funnel, the main courses, middle of funnel, and the dessert, bottom of funnel. That's a way to structure content. Don't make it more complicated than that, because this is not, in comparison to the lead stages, this is not 100% data driven. This is a hint. So if you consume a lot of starters, we could assume that you're in the beginning of your journey. If you consume a lot of dessert or only dessert, we could assume or presume that you're towards the bottom of the funnel, but it's not 100% clear. The second advice is to actually work with your content and make it data driven. And as you saw in the presentation, I stated that Excel is an excellent tool to produce content. And so what did I mean with that? It's just to say, I don't want you to create your nice looking presentations in Excel or anything, but take the time to put your content into a structure, into a matrix. That could look something like this. So you have the persona, stage, and theme layout. And then when you produce, let's say, something that we call article A, then you have to answer the question, who is this for? It's for the persona CEO, it's at the stage, bottom funnel, and it's the theme cost. And do like that for everything that you produce, because that would, at least to some extent, make it possible to make the content along the customer journey data-driven. The third advice is to stop guessing. And this is, of course, easy to say, but it's not always that easy to do. So what you want to ask yourself is it possible to segment on these factors? Do we have this data? In this case, mostly profile data. So if you want to reach this CEO who's interested in ROI, the theme, with a lead scoring higher than X at a company with more than 1,000 employees in the energy sector, and with a mustache, the word I think, then you have to have that data in behind as well. So be sure that if you want to be structured and have good segments, keep an eye on your data model. So stop guessing. The fourth thing to make sure that you benefit from your customer journeys and make something out of them is, of course, to measure. And the easy thing to measure, as I mentioned before, are those attributes that are 100% data-driven and where you can get data from day one if you have that structure. So how many users come into the website or your digital channels? How many leads or contacts are created? How many hot leads or marketing qualified leads? How many sales accepted leads, etc. Because what you get is not only these individual KPIs, you also get the conversion rates between them. And then if you add filters, you will also get another view on them that could be per campaign. So MQLs per campaign, or MQLs per time period, or SQLs per geographic area or product area or service area. So that's one way of looking at the customer journey and being able to measure and putting filters on it so that you can evaluate the different KPIs from different perspectives. The last advice, the fifth advice, is to increase speed in your campaign work, in the marketing automation campaigns that you put up there. And start with launch date. and being very, very clear to the organization and that this is when it kicks off. That's when our first 3 automated programs, or even 1 non-automated program, goes out. And I believe that it's possible to do that from start, even before implementing a system, till you have the first interaction with the client. It should be possible to do in about 8 weeks. I've seen cases where it took more than 2 years to get to the first interaction, then you don't get any data back. I've seen cases where you spend months and months in creating the most beautiful emails. Don't do that, because sometimes it takes 10, 100, 1,000 short emails to make personalized journeys. So try to spend 2 days maximum on an email, and then go with it, and then improve after time. So start with a launch date, get quickly to the first interaction, the first flow, the first nurturing, whatever, first campaign, and don't overdo it. Because you have to get going to get data back, and then to improve the different nurturing flows, the different programs along a customer journey. So that was actually it, and I wish you a great Yule board season for the upcoming month. Like I started with, I don't know, I don't see my slide now, but if I click, yes. Like I started, my conclusion from almost 10 years in the business with marketing automation is start small, keep it simple. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Very good, and a lot of good advice as a start of the conference. Well, I have, of course, some questions. I guess maybe the audience also have, and if you have one and haven't written in it yet, so just write it in the comment field. Do you see any differences between B2C and B2B, as it's always people from both sides in this conference?
Yeah, well, I think there's more similarities. There's more things that are exactly the same. One big difference is looking, and of course there's also mixes of companies that do partly business to consumer or partly business to business or mixed business models. And there's consumer products with a considered purchase approach, something that is expensive or takes time to buy, which looks more or acts more like a business-to-business concept. Mm-hmm. But I would say that there's more similarities, but when dealing with business-to-consumer marketing automation, you tend to look at groups, segments, rather than individuals. Business to business, you can actually drill down to the very individual person, look at their different data attributes and where they're at in the customer journey. While with business to consumer, you look at bigger segments, try to scope limits to get groups of people to get the same information.
Mm-hmm. I also think that B2B sometimes you mix customer entity with the contact person's entity. So I mean, maybe you say that we don't have so many customers, but maybe you have a lot of contacts, and then kind of it's the same.
Which takes us into the account-based thinking, exactly, which is also, of course, more valid in a business-to-business context. So if you have a lot of early, let's say, top funnel actors within a certain company, that could point towards that being a very interesting company, but they're still early in the journey. But there might be 10 people or leads interacting from the same company that could be interesting to pick up, or use a account-based lead scoring model, for example, to see that happens even if the individual interest is not on that high yet. Mm.
I see many examples of companies collecting information from customers, but I believe they forget about telling why they collect it and what's in it for me that I should give it to them.
Yeah, it's true, but I think also with GDPR, that is the pressure is put on that specific point from a legal perspective, that you have to tell people why you collect the information, and not only why, but also which information and how to get rid of it. Mm. I mean, that's something that you have to do. I'm not saying that everybody's doing it yet, but so far it's good enough to be able to show that you're working on it. But that's something that really drives that, because I think that's a good thing, because it shows the client that you have a serious approach. And you could also use that to show benefits, good stuff. I mean, that's what it's all about. You want to attract the client. So showing them what you could offer and having them selecting the good pieces on the yield board. I mean, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, and like I usually take Runkeeper as an example. You love to give a lot of information to Runkeeper because you get so much back.
Yeah.
But many companies, I believe, forget about that. We don't get so much value back.
I think that's really where marketing automation stands today. To really not, try to figure out who's who and who likes what, but to have a very open communication and give, as a company, give back the best you have.
Yeah. Daniel, my dear sidekick, do we have any questions or comments or?
No questions or comments at the moment.
Okay, good. What about if you want to look at industries or companies that are best practice? Do you see any specific industries that are better than the others?
Well, I mean, one industry that has been forced to be in digital, being forced to deal with data in a good way, is e-commerce. So I think companies where e-commerce has been part of their business for some time, they're pretty good. Not to say that they're excellent at everything, but in terms of using data and recommendations and automations, I would say e-commerce has been a strong driver, at least in the business consumer area.
Yeah.
Then I wouldn't say that there's a specific area of the market that are better, really. Depends on the people in the company.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Martin Stenke.
Thank you
very much for the introduction of the conference.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.